Awesome. So we're live. Thanks for joining us once again on one of our community roundtables. It's been a little while since we've done this. Lots has changed in the world since the last time we did one of these. And it's been a very interesting time for us. So we're very keen to share how we've been dealing with it and what we're currently up to, and also to talk about the launch of Session, which has been a super exciting development in the history of Loki. And we'd love to field some questions from you guys about it and, just open up that conversation. So my name's Simon. I'm the CEO of the Loki Project. I also sit on the board of directors of the Loki Foundation. And today I'm joined by Jason, Niels, Key, Chris, and Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan's running the stream, actually. He won't be saying anything. Sorry, Jimmy. And also Josh as well. Maybe each of you guys might give just a one line of what you do at Loki.
All right, I'll go first. I'm Josh, and I deal with all the marketing related stuff at Loki, and am a director on the Loki Foundation.
Hey everybody, I'm Niels. Some of you might have seen me before on previous roundtables. I do iOS and Android, and I'm also the project manager for Session.
Hey guys, I'm the CTO at Loki, so I deal with most of the technical stuff, management of the development team, and a lot of research as well at Loki.
I'm Jason. I do core development and Loki Net development and a bunch of other random stuff.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm head of operations, and I do a lot of sort of the back end stuff, a lot of the people sort of stuff on the backside. And yeah.
Cool. All right.
Keep the ball rolling.
So I have some questions listed here. If you are watching this stream today, you're welcome to drop questions into the chat, and we will get around to them before this is over, hopefully. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the discussion. So first of all, I think we should talk about the Session release. I think that's the biggest thing that's happened in Loki in quite some time. It's been a pretty wild ride for everyone on the team. We've really done quite well, in my opinion, in getting that initial adoption drive, which we'll talk about. There have been some technical challenges. There has been some teething issues, which we expected, but maybe hoped that wouldn't last as long as they have. But we have plans in place and development occurring right now, which we think is going to resolve a lot of these issues rather quickly. We've been working at it for quite a while already. But I have some questions here that we've picked up. And the first question is, what was the Session release like, and how did it go? I mean, from my perspective, it crept up on us out of nowhere, really. We said it, and then weeks rolled by, and then all of a sudden it was upon us, and it became very real very quickly. And it was a really exciting moment, actually, to get it out there. And the first couple of weeks for me were very high energy, just tracking everything that was going on and trying to get on top of things. And I think, especially for the marketing team, it's been a big change. But I think I'll let Josh explain more about how the launch went from his perspective.
Yeah, I think the launch went really good. I mean, in the first few months, we had an explosion of downloads. Only just the other day, we ticked over 100,000 downloads on just Android alone. And this was, without us even doing a very big marketing push to begin with. So this makes me think that I think the rebrand was really successful in us going from Loki Messenger to Session, because the target audiences that we rebranded for, it seems like all the people we intended this to go towards, it kind of spoke to them and it went towards them. So I think it was really good from that perspective. And that's kind of how I saw it. At the moment, like, we're suffering, I guess, retention issues, just, due to the kind of state that the app is at. But I'm still really impressed of how much it sort of exploded and it got away from us. All we really did on the marketing side of things was just some targeted advertising on like the Google Play Store and the App Store, and like little bits here and there, but without even doing anything much. I've been pretty impressed so far.
And Niels, I mean, it was a huge technical challenge getting Session to where it was at launch, and then immediately following the launch, it's been a whole new swath of challenges. Maybe you want to tell us how you think it's gone so far.
Yeah, sure. So like you said before, we definitely expected some bugs after launch. I think that's normal, especially for something like Session, which is honestly like a very complicated app. So we expected that, but like you said, we did see a bit more bugs than we expected. We've been working hard at fixing those, and we've come a long way. We focused very heavily on improving the core of the app, very much fixing the core issues that we think are responsible for some of the bugs that people have been seeing. I think we've come a long way in that. We actually have a couple very exciting changes coming out soon as well, possibly today or the start of next week. And very soon, I think we'll have this sort of reliable, solid, stable base to then build the rest of the app out on top of. So to me, the Session release was not a single point in time, really. It's been basically the last 2 or 3 months. And I'd say we are, at this point, almost done with the initial release and ready to go further with Session and move it further along.
With that, Josh, maybe you want to run us through what our active user count looks like. So aside from downloads, there's also a figure which we are able to get some insight on through the Google and Apple Play Store and App Store, which is the active user count. What can you tell us?
So yeah, that tracking's kind of hard because we actively try to implement as little tracking as possible. So all we really have are statistics that the App Store and the Google Play Store give us. So currently, from what they're giving us, what we can see are downloads, but we can see if the app was used within a month. So that can give us a monthly active user count. And it's very rough too, because it doesn't even take into account, the people who are, it doesn't take into account desktop. It doesn't take into account people downloading the APIs or building it from source. But so what we're just getting from Apple and Google are 25,000 monthly active users now. We're sitting around there, and it seems to just keep growing as well. But yeah, that's where we're at it currently.
Sweet. Okay. I've got another question here. This is for Niels and Key. Actually, I got a series of shortish questions for you. And by the way, if you're sitting in the chat there, wondering about things you want to get some answers to, do feel free to drop in those questions in there. We are monitoring the chat, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. This is a community roundtable. You are sitting here with us, and we'd love to hear from you. So do let yourself be known. Niels and Key, when will Session have support for video and voice calls?
I might jump in on this one. It's highly dependent on Loki Net support. So currently what we have in the application right now is what we call proxy routing. Basically, you connect to a random service node, and then you send your message to that random service node, and that service node sends it to the destination swarm. And it's similar for when you're receiving a message. You ask a random service node to go and retrieve a message from a swarm for you. This is only TCP based, which means all of the popular video chat platforms all use UDP because you don't need this acknowledgement stream that's going on with TCP. So if we were to adapt a video chat to this service node proxy system to give you anonymity, it would all fall apart really quickly. So we need something more like Loki Net, which is able to handle a wider range of traffic, including UDP. Even then, we haven't really tried video chat that much on Loki Net, so we don't really know if it would work super well. We've done voice chat on Loki Net, and we know that works fine. The latency is tolerable. So it's just working towards whether we can see if we can do video chat on Loki Net, and then working Loki Net into a mobile implementation as well. So getting it using the native VPN API on iOS and Android, that's another tricky step as well. So there's a few steps that we have to take before that happens, and it'll probably happen with voice calls before video calls.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. So just to make the timeline even a bit more concrete, for the next couple months, we'll still be focusing on just making what we have really, really good, and also adding a few new features that are often requested. When that is done, we'll look at Loki Net integration, which, like Keith said, is what we need to support voice calls and eventually video calls as well.
Follow-up question to that is there an API or library that is planned for sessions so that chatbots can be made?
Not in the immediate future. It's something that we want to do, but it's currently not a priority for us. I don't know if Key wants to add to that.
No, I think that's right. We're still working on expanding closed groups, for example, fixing some of the bugs that are present before we move on to some of those like sugarcoat features, which are nice to have.
I have another question here for Niels and Key. Will session always be based on Signal?
So I'd like to take this question. So our sort of hope is to eventually have the Signal protocol essentially as a dependency, and have the rest of the app be, mostly independent from Signal. We're already moving in that direction. So for example, a lot of the UI is just built from the ground up, has nothing to do with Signal, although some of the UI is still based on Signal right now. And obviously the whole service node communication layer has nothing to do with Signal either. We want to strip away more Signal code. So a big step, for example, for us would be the message sending and receiving pipelines. We'd like to sort of redo those ourselves, and so that we, have more control over them, and so that we can modernize them as well. And when that is done, and we redo more of the UI as well, then we'll actually already be quite independent of Signal. But yeah, the eventual goal, the eventual hope is to just have the Signal protocol and not much else.
Cool. Follow on from that, it would actually be this other question, which is when can we expect some UI UX improvements for session? My understanding is the only thing that's really left that hasn't been overhauled completely is the conversation view, which is actually the view that you look at the most, funnily enough. But maybe you want to talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So essentially everything except the conversation screen has been redone from the ground up. The reason we left out the conversation screen is because, well, essentially we were just pressed for time. And the conversation screen is the most intricate out of all the screens in the app. It is our goal to redo that as well, so that it'll be easier for us to customize it and make it more in line with our designs and the way we want it to be. But that still needs to happen. So that's one prerequisite for some UX UI improvements. And then the other thing I'd like to point out again is that we've been focusing in the last 2 or 3 months on core improvements, making the app more reliable. We're now more or less coming to the end of that, but like I said, some of these fixes have not been rolled out yet. So then after that, when that's done, then when issues still occur, we know that they're issues in and of themselves, and that they're not just indirectly caused by core issues, if that makes sense. I don't know if you want to add to that, Key.
No, I'd agree with everything you said. I think the last point you made is important as well. Like, a lot of the errors that we were finding users running into were actually caused by something that was at a lower level. So you'd see errors pop up like messages failing to send, but really that was caused by like some kind of proxy routing that was going on underneath failing. So we're really trying to address some of those core issues so we can affect the issues that users see.
Also, when you guys say conversation screens, do you mean the screen when you're actually conversing with another person, or the screen that shows all the conversations that you have available?
The first option.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the design that we have prepared for the conversation screen is much more attractive than what is currently in place. So I look forward to seeing that done, just from an aesthetic perspective as well as a technical one. So I have one final question that I wanted to share from the sort of session-related questions for today. This is one for Josh mostly, which is, and I think you touched on it before, has the marketing effort for session been delayed because of app stability issues? Can we expect a marketing push anytime soon? So maybe you want to detail your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, the short answer is yeah, it definitely has been delayed. But apart from stability aside, the world just went and decided to make everyone sick. So even from the pandemic standpoint, at the moment, any news about a new kind of app, I don't think is going to get the cut through that it otherwise would have had if it wasn't for this time. And like, rightly so, the news is just dominated by coronavirus. So on top of that, it's very hard to kind of do a big sort of push out from that standpoint alone. But also, yeah, the stability is kind of another major issue. Around this time now is when we were kind of predicting to be doing our big sort of push. But from the feedback that we've sort of gotten from different organizations that we're reaching out to, they find that the app has a lot of promise. They really like it, but it isn't a viable solution for them to use right now. And people want a solution to their problem right now, not in 2 months' time. So what we're kind of doing is we're holding off, I guess. If you're saying, can you expect it sometime soon, it's going to happen when the app is actually ready to be used by these people, is when we're going to do that bigger sort of marketing push. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything right now. There's still a lot of groups that we can reach out to that are interested in the app at its current state. So that's kind of like your privacy tech community, who we reach out to a lot. There's the open source community. They'd be interested in an app, the privacy community for the privacy preserving aspects of the tech, the open source community because they're interested in building on open source tech. And we've got kind of, I think, an impressive open source project going on. And then there's also the crypto community, because when you look at our user numbers, they don't stack up well against the other private messages out there right now. But when you compare it to other crypto applications, we stack up really, really well. So there's still things that we can do right now while we're waiting. So it's not like we're not doing anything, but long answer long, yeah, the marketing has been delayed and we'll be doing a bigger push later when everything's more in place, but there's still things we can do right now.
What excites me is that you're basically saying that we haven't done anything and we already have 100,000 downloads on Android, which I find hilarious. And if that's the case, then I really look forward to seeing what you guys can pull off in a few months' time.
Yeah.
There is one question from the chat related to session that I'll cover quickly before we move on to other subjects. This comes from Skeleton. How's the light/dark theme coming along? Niels, you wanna field that one?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, so we've done some work on light mode on desktop and iOS. I wouldn't say it's done on those platforms, but it's, call it 80% done. But we've shelved it for now because we'd rather focus, like I said before, on the more core issues. And when we feel that things are stable, then we'll roll out these sort of UI UX improvements. And one more thing about light mode is that we want to do it cross-platform at the same time. So we'd have to do Android first as well before rolling it out.
Yeah, sweet. All right, moving on to not as many session-related questions. I have an interesting question from the chat. This comes from Tiago, and the question is, in my and the community's opinion, proof of work is beyond obsolete, particularly in the case of Loki. Now with checkpointing enabled, how soon can we expect Pulse? And this is probably a good one for Jason and Key.
So Pulse is on our roadmap for the next fork. So that's where we're aiming to do it. We've got a plan to do it. We're just taking care of a bunch of other stuff before we random things that have come up and fixes we need to implement. So I mean, next 2 to 3 months, kind of, is the tentative roadmap for that. We did take one step towards it, of course, in the last fork, where we adjusted the rewards down quite substantially for miners. And that was kind of the first step because we really don't need a lot of mining right now with checkpointing, as Tiago brought up. And Pulse is just going to be the knockout punch to miners that say, okay, go away. We don't want you anymore. It's nice to have you for a while, but that's enough.
And I think that is all we're going to have for questions from Jason today. Your audio is not fabulous, apparently. Everyone else is hearing what I'm hearing. It's very choppy. But anyway, I think I understood that. I hope you guys understood that. I hope that answers your question. Key, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a good summary. The paper's out there, so we know it's kind of technically possible. We just need to crack onto the implementation, and that's being delayed a little bit by some of the bugs that have been found in 7.1, 7.1.3, and some of the Loki MQ work and various other things. So we hope to get onto it soon.
Sweet. All right, so other LokiNet/core questions. Here's a good one for you, Key. When can we set up and utilize Loki exit nodes? I think this is an interesting question, given LokiNet is now live on the mainnet and is pretty stable. So the question now is, okay, so what do we do with it? If you want to field that.
Yeah, actually, I might confer to Jason at the end of this, but I think you can already set up a Loki exit node. It's just not, you won't be incentivized for doing that. The incentive model is really where a lot of the work is going to come in, and especially on the testing side, because we want to know someone is a service node and not just acting, or an exit node and not just acting like an exit node and collecting an extra reward, which is a lot trickier than it sounds. So there's going to be a lot of work going into finding a suitable method to test whether someone's actually honestly acting as an exit node. But I think the answer to that is that you can already set up an exit node voluntarily and manually configure that in your Loki Net client. But I'll confer to Jason on this one.
And I've got okay, go ahead, Jason.
I don't know if you can hear me any better with the video turned off, but
unfortunately not. But go on.
So there's an interesting proposal that I think people should look at that was created by Technical Tumbleweed in the Loki improvement processes, and really the obstacle with exit nodes right now is not a question of supporting them in Loki Net, because that's there. As Key mentioned, you can go in and you can say, I'm gonna set up my router as an exit node. You can do that. The problem is we don't have the incentive model nailed yet. So as long as people are saying, okay, well, I could go voluntarily set up an exit node and let people go through me, probably I'll get hit with tons of traffic and it's going to be a pain and I'm getting nothing for my effort. So we're not expecting that people are going to do that. So we really kind of need to think about how to incentivize that exit model. Now, if you go back to the original white paper, we talked about incentivizing it by paying up from the block reward, and there are some problems with that. One of the big ones being that there's a very strange incentive in that I want to get paid to be an exit node. I want to get paid out of the block, but the traffic that I take is actually bad for me. Because the perfect scenario is I want to get paid and I don't want to have to take any traffic. So there's a big incentive to cheat, and that's really the issue that we need to solve. And it's not an easy issue.
Cool. All right. I hope that answers the questions. But the community doesn't seem to think your answers are of much value at all right now, given the state of your audio quality, Jason. Very, very disappointing. I see you've tried to turn your video up to make it better, but I don't think it's happening. So what we might do is we might move on from LokiNet and core questions, but I have one from the chat that I do want to cover very quickly, which is what updates are planned for the Windows LokiNet GUI. I know you've been tracking this quite closely, Key. Maybe you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so if you've downloaded what is on our GitHub recently or from the lokinet.org site, you'll see that the GUI is entirely changed. It's more looking like a VPN application right now with a big green button that you press and that turns LokiNet on. In terms of other changes to the GUI, we're just getting the Mac stuff sorted now. I think we might have been talking in one of our channels that it's actually finished today, so I'm going to have to test that out. And Linux also has a GUI as well that you can install through the Debian packages. So we're GUI on all fronts, and also this is coming out with 0.7 or 0.7.0, which is like the latest version of LokiNet, which is actually very, very, very stable, like more stable than I've ever seen LokiNet in my life. And that was because of a lot of the design changes that we made about 2 months ago to improve the process of DHT lookups and router discovery as well. So I'm hoping that this version of LokiNet is going to be the version of LokiNet that really captures a lot of people's attention and that we do kind of a bigger marketing push on.
Sweet. So to wrap this up, we've probably got about 10, 15 minutes left. Pretty big topic in the world at the moment is the global pandemic situation that we all face, of course. And, we are like every other company in that it has had impacts on us. And I just wanted to answer some questions around that. And then some other company-related questions and sort of more general strategic company direction sort of thing. So I might get Chris to help me on some of these answers. So what happened with us was during the pandemic, we're based here in Melbourne, Australia, which at the moment is one of the best places in the Western world to be in terms of the coronavirus. The case numbers are very, very low. However, it hasn't been without impact on us. About 4 weeks ago, a lot of the team were taking time off from work because they were worried about getting sick, or they were already sick with something in a lot of cases. So I basically made the call that we were going to go full remote about a week before the lockdowns were actually put into place. And then, so I got my car and I got a bunch of people's computers and screens and stuff and dropped it off at their houses, and we've been working remotely ever since. So we're all working from home, which has been an interesting challenge for the business. We've never been a team that works fully remotely. In fact, I would say for the most part, we're in general a team that doesn't like the idea of doing it for a number of reasons. But I'm pretty happy with how it's gone. We set up some new processes to make sure that productivity would be good, and that we would have a reasonable continuity of what we were doing and what we were working on. So that's been really successful, in my opinion. And hopefully, in the coming weeks, we'll have the opportunity to come back to the office. The office's main function, in my eyes, is not just a place to work, but because you can do that from anywhere, really. But it's more so the collaboration that happens. It's very easy to just walk over to someone's desk or overhear a conversation and chime in on a design discussion or a strategic discussion. And I think being in an office leads to better decisions. But I think there are also advantages to working from home. I think for a lot of people, it is actually a much more productive place. It's easy to focus. But I think that's a debate for other people to worry about. We'll be coming back to the office as soon as we can, basically. So, Chris, maybe you want to tell us a little more about how the team's been doing in lockdown. You've sort of been the main man in charge of making sure everyone is A-okay.
Yeah, it seems like it was more the fear and that week before we went full remote, when people were getting a little bit sick and people weren't working that well. People didn't want to come into the office. But now that everyone's gone full remote, it seems like things weren't as bad as we sort of thought they might have been. And it seems like a lot of people are working remote happily. There's a lot more communications, a lot more people who we have on the team who work full-time remote, be in the US or in other states in Australia. They're really happy that sort of we're all online and all contactable throughout the day. So there's been a lot of little things popping up that a lot of people are really happy about. I guess some of the things that coronavirus is stopping us from doing right now is sort of attending conferences. We had a few really exciting ones coming up throughout the year that we were looking forward to like hopefully get speaking roles at and stuff. But it seems like that's not happening at this time. So I guess we're saving a little bit of money there as well, but we're losing that attention that we're really looking forward to. And the Australian government's actually helping us out a bit at this time, which we're really grateful for. So yeah, other than that, I think the team is working together pretty well remotely. It's a lot better than what we expected at first.
The thing I find really interesting about it is because obviously there's pros and cons to everyone being in the office and everyone going remote. But it's interesting that, having gone remote, we've had to change a lot of the ways the whole team communicates to each other. And we're finding a lot of ways that work better. On the pro side, there's some changes that we've made to go remote that actually are superior to how they were in the office. So I'm kind of looking forward to when we all get back in the office, like maintaining those different channels or those new ways that we found works with communication, and everything will get even better. So I think that's definitely an upside to everything going remote for a period of time.
I got a question here, which is, are there any partnerships in the works, i.e. with NGOs? I'm happy to field this one. We have actually struck up quite a few interesting conversations with a number of interesting people working in various parts of the world on various things. Nothing I can openly detail yet. We will put out releases when the time is right, but it's been really exciting to see how interested people are in session and the potential that they see in it. And it's been also very interesting to help work on and maintain and design new ways of thinking about things with some of these organizations already. So we're really excited about some upcoming partnerships, particularly in the NGO space. There'll be more to follow on that.
If you go to the Loki Foundation website, in the About section, we have a partners and allies section, and you can see some of the organizations that we've got good relationships with, or we've collaborated with, or we've kind of got partnerships with currently. So if you're kind of curious, you can go to that section and see those names and get an idea. But it's constantly being expanded on right now during this time as well.
Yeah, it's sort of one of the big objectives for this year is to get the support of digital rights groups and journalism groups and that sort of thing. It's really important for us that the tool that we've built is actually useful and interesting to the people that we want to use it the most, if that makes sense. So that's going to be an ongoing thing for us throughout the rest of the year. And hopefully that leads to some really positive outcomes for Session, both in terms of user numbers, possibly in terms of funding, and just general interest within the public as well. So stay tuned on that for more. I got some more questions here. What are the biggest goals for Loki?
Before you go there, can you guys hear me now?
That's
without
much better.
It breaking up?
Yeah.
See, I went back to old technology and I actually dialed in with the phone. So,
it's working.
Wow.
Yeah, we were getting too high tech here. So I can come back to some of those questions if you want.
I can't even remember what they were. So we're going to wrap up the stream relatively soon. So if you do have any last minute questions regarding any topic to do with Loki, please do drop them in the chat now so we can cover off on them before we sign off for the day. More sort of broader questions. Have you contacted other open source development teams to implement LokiNet/Session, i.e. Tails, Unix, Graphene, etc.? Key, why don't you talk about what we're doing with other teams?
Actually, I know we've had contact from some of those people. I talked to someone from Graphene OS. I don't know about Unix or Tails, but in terms of implementing Session or LokiNet, those teams that have contacted us have been more interested in developing their own forks of Session, which is something that's interesting, but we don't really have that much time to support at the moment since we're still focused on ironing out the bugs in Session itself before someone can successfully fork it. Definitely, we do want alternate client implementations that use the same network, though. That would be a good thing. But yeah, we're still trying to get Session into a state where it's really reliable. And maybe LokiNet might be the more interesting one on that side because it is so developed. But then you also have the issue of it doesn't allow you to access the ClearNet just yet, or it does allow you to access the ClearNet, but not in an incentivized way that would want to promote on a large scale. So there's still some teething issues for those.
Yeah, my view on this is what's the point in developing alternate client implementations when the first one isn't even in a mature or stable, not stable, but static state. Across the board, from Loki Core to LokiNet to Session, they've all undergone major protocol changes as we've developed them. Not because that's the way we intended to do it. It's just because as we've gone along, we've discovered better, faster, more efficient, more reliable ways of doing things. And so it does mean that the protocol is across the board in a pretty serious state of flux, and to have multiple client implementations on the go at any given moment would severely slow down our progress. But it is something that would be useful in the future once we've landed in a solid place with each of those products potentially. So it's not off the cards. We're definitely looking to get it integrated in its core implementation format into as many open source software systems as possible. We think that's really cool. Everything from things like PinePhone to Tails would be, I think, a really excellent use of Session. It really speaks to what we wanted it to be used for. So yeah, I got another question from the chat, which is, can you give me more details about the funding developments? And I think this ties into another question, which I have written down here, which is, what are the biggest goals for Loki in the next 2 years? So obviously running the Loki team is a fairly expensive process. I think there's almost 30 of us working on this full time, which isn't, amazingly cheap, obviously, but it does mean that we are able to progress very quickly, and it leads to a lot of efficiencies as well, because it means that specific people on the team can work on the things that they are particularly strong at, rather than having to do a whole bunch of random stuff to pick up the pieces of operating in a small team environment. So we're quite comfortable operating at this size for the foreseeable future. Funding is obviously something that we need to constantly think about in order to be able to sustain, that sort of size. So in terms of actual funding developments, coronavirus has really put a halt to any sort of conversations that were being had with, people that were operating in this space. Some of them may not exist in 6 months' time. I imagine the space is going to be shaken up quite a lot. And this is going to be a challenge for us, admittedly, but it's not something we have to worry about for, not into next year anyway. So it's not too much of an issue right now. It could be in the future, but we'll see. The other route that we have started going down is through grants, both from government agencies as well as other NGOs. The area of software that we work in is of high interest to a lot of freedom of speech, democracy, freedom of the press, et cetera, funds and government initiatives, as well as research and development initiatives. So there are a number of funding pathways that we can explore and have been exploring through that way. We've applied for a couple of grants already, and I could talk more about them, but you never know until the grant has closed whether or not you got it. So unless we get it, I'm not going to go into too much detail. But it is a exciting avenue as well. And then obviously we also made some changes to the block reward with community support recently that will allow us to continue thinking about fundraising in terms of Loki, the cryptocurrency itself, which I think is an essential part of the overall concept. So yeah, that will be something that is explored in the future. I've got another question from the chat here. Is it possible to crawl LokiNet for content? Not everything is of a legal nature, and having a searchable index of content would be, in my humble opinion, help drive adoption versus Tor. Maybe Jason and Key, you guys want to talk about this real quick?
Yeah, Jason can go ahead on this one.
Yeah, so no, you cannot crawl LokiNet for LokiNet addresses, and that's really deliberate. Because we don't want people to say, hey, I want to be able to see and access everything that's out there. So, our services are, you can put something out there and you are in control of who you want to send your Loki address to. And if you don't send it to anyone, then no one's going to know about it. Is it possible to set up a search engine on LokiNet? Yeah, sure, people could do that, but, it's not something in the core of LokiNet itself. That's something that would be on top of LokiNet.
Yeah, currently we have a wiki page where you can add your snap to, and I think there's about 10 snaps there right now, so you can go and have a little bit of fun with some of those. But in terms of, Jason's right, the core, everything is hashed, so you're not actually sharing LokiNet addresses. In the clear, you're sharing a hash of that address, so you actually need to know what the Loki address is to be able to go backwards and work out where it is in LokiNet.
All right, so we've crossed over the 45-minute mark now, and I think that would be a good point to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks, team, for taking some time out of your day to have a chat to the community. It's always good. I hope it makes a difference for the community members out there. It gives you guys some insight into where our heads are at and what we're up to. It gives you an opportunity to discuss things with us. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope to see you again in the next one. As usual, you can find us in our chat channels in various places, including now within the session app itself. So as always, if you do have questions, thoughts, or ideas, feel free to post them. We're very active. We do like talking about our work. It's our passion. It's what we do. So thanks again for joining us. Hope to see you soon, and get your friends to use session, preferably next week when it's really good. Thanks.